On December 4th, 2024, a man walking toward a Midtown Manhattan hotel was shot to death on the sidewalk. The victim was 50-year-old Brian Thompson. He was a father, a husband, and the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. For nearly 2 years following his death, the public anticipated a New York State murder trial to determine the legal consequences for his killer. But that state trial may never actually happen. On August 14, 2026, 28-year-old Luigi Mangione stood inside a federal courtroom and pleaded guilty. He entered his confession onto the record. "I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan, and he died. I knew what I was doing was illegal." While the confession was widely reported, the legal strategy behind the plea was less obvious. This federal plea was a deliberate move to challenge the state's ability to move forward with its own murder trial. To understand how a guilty plea in one court can stall a case in another, we have to look at dual prosecution. From the beginning, Mangione faced two completely separate sets of charges for the same act. On the first track, New York State charged him with murder and weapons offenses. On the second track, the federal government pursued charges of interstate stalking resulting in death. For a year and a half, these two legal proceedings moved forward independently, each toward its own trial date. The evidence gathered in both cases was extensive. Investigators found that in the weeks before the shooting, Mangione used a 3D printer to manufacture a firearm and a silencer. He tracked Thompson's location by posing as a potential investor, claiming to manage $50 billion, and traveled by bus to New York using a fake identity. At the crime scene, prosecutors recovered DNA and fingerprints that physically linked Mangione to the evidence found in Manhattan. This volume of physical and digital evidence made a defense against the federal charges difficult, leading to the decision to plead guilty. By pleading guilty in federal court, Mangione is now set for a sentencing hearing in December 2026, where he faces a potential term of life in prison. As soon as that plea was entered, Mangione's attorneys immediately moved to dismiss the New York State charges by invoking the state's double jeopardy protections. New York law generally prohibits prosecuting someone twice for the same underlying physical conduct. By admitting guilt and accepting a federal sentence, the defense has created a legal argument to prevent the state trial from moving forward. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is challenging this motion. State prosecutors argue they retain the right to pursue their own conviction for a murder committed in Manhattan, regardless of the federal outcome. The future of the state case now depends on how a New York State Supreme Court justice interprets the double jeopardy statute. This creates a period of legal uncertainty. The state murder trial, which has been the primary focus of public attention for 2 years, is now on hold while the judge decides if it can proceed. Regardless of the judge's ruling on the state trial, Mangione's federal conviction and his sworn confession are now part of the public record. He remains in federal custody, awaiting a December sentencing that carries a maximum penalty of life in prison. While much of the public's focus remains on whether a state trial will happen, the core legal outcome of the case has already been established in federal court.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, high-profile story that, let's be honest, almost everyone thinks is completely wrapped up. If you've been anywhere near the news lately, you've seen the headlines, "Luigi Mangione confessed." But I'm here to tell you that there is a huge public misconception about the conclusion of this case. The story is far from over, and the legal battle happening behind the scenes right now is absolutely fascinating.
So let's start right here with the big myth. On August 14th, Luigi Mangione stood inside a federal courtroom and admitted that he shot UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He pleaded guilty. Now, if you're like most people, you're probably thinking, okay, case closed, right? It totally makes sense why you'd assume that. I mean, a federal guilty plea usually means no jury, no dramatic months-long trial, and the whole story just gets tied up in a neat little bow.
But here's the reality. That New York murder trial, it was absolutely not dismissed. Just 3 days after he pleaded guilty in federal court, a New York judge basically hit the brakes on the upcoming state trial and kicked off this entirely different, super complex legal fight that honestly most people completely missed. The case didn't just end, it transformed.
Part 1, the confession.
To really wrap our heads around how we ended up at this bizarre legal crossroads, we need to look at exactly what went down in federal court. Mangione pleaded guilty to 2 very specific federal charges, interstate stalking resulting in death and cyber stalking resulting in death. And during that hearing, he explicitly admitted to shooting Brian Thompson. We aren't just talking about prosecutors claiming they had a mountain of evidence. This was Mangione himself standing up and accepting full responsibility for his conduct under those federal charges. And this is crucial. The potential maximum sentence for this is life in prison. In fact, prosecutors intend to seek exactly that.
Part 2. Two separate cases. Okay, so if he admitted to it and he's staring down a potential life sentence, what in the world is left to fight about? Well, it turns out Mangione has actually been fighting a two-front legal war, and these two cases are completely severed. On one side, you've got the federal case where he entered that guilty plea on August 14th for stalking resulting in death, but on the flip side, we have the state case in New York. Before his federal plea even happened, New York prosecutors had already charged him with murder and weapons offenses. That trial was scheduled to kick off on September 8th. It's a pretty extraordinary situation. You have the exact same defendant, the same victim, the same killing, but two totally different court systems trying to prosecute it.
Part 3. The Double Jeopardy Fight.
Literally, the moment Mangione pleaded guilty federally, his defense team went straight on the attack against that state case. And they didn't just walk in and say, hey, he pleaded guilty over there, let him go. No, they used a very specific legal mechanism. The defense asked the New York judge to dismiss the state prosecution entirely based on double jeopardy. In plain English, that just means you shouldn't be prosecuted twice for the exact same criminal conduct.
Which obviously begs the question, why isn't this just an automatic win for the defense? I mean, it's the same guy, the same victim, the same shooting, and he just gave a federal guilty plea. Why not just toss out the state case right then and there? Well, it's because criminal law is incredibly, incredibly precise. It's about a whole lot more than just the same person doing the same physical event.
Part 4. The crucial differences.
See, courts don't just look at what physically happened on the street. They look under the hood at the exact legal elements of the offenses being charged. And there are some really crucial differences here. In federal court, the core focus is stalking. The key legal element there requires proving interstate activity that resulted in a death. But in the state of New York, their core focus is murder and weapons offenses, where the legal element is the actual physical act of the killing itself. So the prosecution is arguing that because these legal elements are substantially different, Mangione isn't actually being prosecuted twice for the exact same legal offense. But the defense? They're pushing back hard, arguing that it all stems from the exact same underlying criminal transaction.
Part 5. What happens next?
All of this is building toward a massive, high-stakes collision. Let's map out this rapid-fire legal crunch really quick. On August 17th, the New York judge officially postponed that September state trial. He basically told the Manhattan district attorney, you have until October 9th to officially respond to the defense's motion to dismiss. Then Mangione's next state court appearance got set for December 10th, and right on its heels on December 18th is his federal sentencing date. So that state trial didn't just disappear into thin air. It got pushed straight into the middle of this huge unresolved battle.
Just think about that for a second. There are only 8 days between that state hearing and his federal sentencing. That is an incredibly narrow window, creating this totally unprecedented legal situation that is just full of suspense right now.
So the state murder trial hasn't vanished. Instead, it's been pushed into an unresolved legal fight over whether it can even happen at all. The whole legal system has completely pivoted here. We aren't asking, did he do it anymore? He already admitted to that. Now the courts are asking, can the state legally punish him separately for it?
Let's break down the potential outcomes here. Let's say the judge agrees with the defense, and the state case is dismissed based on double jeopardy. That absolutely does not mean Mangione walks free. No way. There would be no New York murder trial, sure, but he's still facing that federal sentencing on December 18th, where, again, he could receive a life sentence.
But what if the state wins this argument? Well, if the judge rules New York can proceed, Mangione faces an additional murder prosecution right on top of whatever his federal sentence ends up being. And frankly, even if the state is allowed to move forward, this massive constitutional double jeopardy question, it could easily spark years and years of further appeals and litigation.
Part 6. The human anchor.
Before we wrap up this explainer, I think it's important we drop the fast-paced legal jargon for a second and just ground ourselves back in reality. Whatever political opinions or debates are out there surrounding the American healthcare system, and whatever complex legal gymnastics are playing out in the courts, we have to remember the human anchor here. Brian Thompson was a real person. He was a 50-year-old husband, a father, and a CEO whose life was taken on December 4th, 2024. A human being was killed, and the courts are now narrowly trying to decide exactly how to punish that specific act, and in which jurisdiction. Which leaves us with this final, towering question. Can a man who already pleaded guilty in federal court still be tried for murder by New York State? Well, the answer to that is still waiting for a judge's ruling.
It is the biggest unresolved saga in this entire case, and it's the part that almost everyone has completely stopped watching. But now you know exactly what to look forward to on December 10th. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on the courts.